All right, here we're looking at obviously a changing landscape. So that's the title of this section, but what it's referring to are the changes that are taking place on the Earth. Why? Because of human population growth. How? Because of human activity. And so I asked you to list some of these things that are changing on the planet due to human population growth and human activity. So one would be what we're discussing earlier, climate change, of course. There's also habitat destruction, pollution, invasive species, and Hawaii is a good example of that, and that's what we're looking at here is Hawaii. A loss of biodiversity as a result of a lot of these other things, primarily extinction due to our activities. Global warming, of course, or climate change. Exploitation of natural resources, acid rain, ozone layer depletion, and that's due to CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons that used to be used as propellants in aerosol cans, but they've been banned in this country. They're still used in other countries, unfortunately, but they've been banned in this country. And they've been banned in a lot of other countries, too. But the ozone layer, oxygen, a molecule of oxygen is O2, ozone is O3, and it builds up in the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, way high in the atmosphere, and it acts like a shield against ultraviolet radiation. Life would have a hard time existing on this planet if it weren't for the ozone layer. And CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, were eating away at the ozone layer, and for some reason, especially around the poles, so both the North and the South Pole. So the damage was done before CFCs were banned, and it's going to take a long time for those holes in the ozone layer to replenish themselves, and also for the ozone layer in general to thicken and protect us from ultraviolet radiation so we don't all get skin cancer. And back on the topic of loss of biodiversity, the point that I'm making here is that there used to be a lot of large mammals in North America, prehistoric animals, and they were hunted to extinction by humans. When humans arrived in North America, and back when we were hunters and gatherers, we basically hunted them all down and killed them all, or we were afraid of them, so we killed them. But our technology has allowed us to pretty much get rid of any animals that we want to get rid of, or hunt any animals that we want to hunt. And that's led to a lot of extinction. There used to be more large North American mammals than there are in Africa now. Now, usually when you think of large mammals, where they live, you think of Africa. But there used to be more large mammals living in North America than in Africa now. And on the next slide, we're looking at one of the things on the list was the exploitation of natural resources. And here we're looking at fisheries, what are referred to as fisheries. So cod and haddock, and the concept of a commons. The open ocean is open to fishing by any country. There are restricted waters, around close to countries, but the open ocean between countries is pretty much fair game for anybody to fish. And so there's a concern about the regulation of fisheries, the regulation of how much fish can be caught of certain species so that they don't get driven to extinction. And so here we're looking at cod and how the cod population dropped drastically from overfishing. And then it was realized what was happening, and so they stopped, and they're recovering, but recovering rather slowly. And it's possible to get down to a population level in these fisheries where the population cannot rebound at all, and they would go extinct. And so that's what we definitely want to avoid. The haddock, another example of overfishing, but then restrictions were placed on the fishing, and the haddock population has rebounded much more quickly than the cod population. But the open ocean and fish represent a commons, what's referred to as a commons, which means a commonly available resource. Anybody's allowed to use it, but that leads to exploitation, especially if there is no regulation. So a true commons is an unregulated natural resource or commonly used resource. And that usually leads to exploitation, and exploitation usually leads to destruction of whatever that resource is, or the loss of whatever that resource is. Also on the list was acid rain, and acid rain's a problem stemming from air pollution. And so here we're seeing industry and transportation and ore smelting, in other words, the production of steel and other metals, power generation, all burning fossil fuels. And that's really the evil here, is the burning of fossil fuels. And there's a connection here to population, and in that the greater the population, the human population, the more of these things are going on. And so what's happening is nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides, the nitrogen oxides primarily coming from the burning of automobile fuel, gasoline, and sulfur dioxides coming from the burning of coal for power production and ore smelting and industry. And the nitrogen oxides, when they get into the atmosphere, they combine with water in clouds and form nitric acid. And the sulfur oxides combine with water in the clouds and form sulfuric acid, which is the same acid that is in car batteries. It's very acidic. Nitric acid also. Both of these are very strong acids. And then they fall with precipitation. And precipitation being a more general term, there is acid rain, but there can also be acid fog and acid snow and acid mist. And especially in aquatic habitats, that's having an effect. Think of all the aquatic organisms that are laying eggs and developing in the water, and if you decrease the pH, if you make them try to reproduce and develop in acidic conditions, that's not going to work very well. So it's having a great effect on aquatic habitats and life, living things living in those aquatic habitats. But also, it's eating away at things like, statues and buildings and so forth. So in general, it's a problem, and especially in areas where there's a lot of coal burning for the generation of power. So what we need to use are renewable resources like solar and wind and water. Finally, there are a lot of services, ecosystem services, that are performed by ecosystems for us. And if we destroy ecosystems and we alter ecosystems or interfere with these processes, it's going to cost us a lot of money, because it would cost trillions of dollars for us to do all of these things for ourselves, even if we could. And some of these are so complex we probably wouldn't be able to do it, at least not on a global scale. So solar energy, what we're talking about here is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is capturing solar energy and making it available to us in the form of food. Production of oxygen, also from photosynthesis, through photosynthesis. Storage and recycling of nutrients. We're talking about biogeochemical cycles here. Regulation of climate. I mean, we're messing it up, but typically the Earth regulates its own climate. Purification of water and air. The water cycle purifies the water. When the water evaporates from the surface of the Earth, it leaves the pollutants behind, and when it falls as rain, that's basically pure water. But it's also cleaning the air, because as it falls through the air, it's picking up pollutants from the air, and that helps to clean the air. Storage and distribution of fresh water, of course, also part of the water cycle. Food production. Not all the food that we eat is grown agriculturally. Some of it is gathered still. Nursery habitats and wildlife. For example, the importance of wetlands as nursery habitats. If we destroy wetlands, then those species are not going to be able to reproduce. Detoxification of human and industrial waste. There are plants that can actually remove the pollutants that result from mining, for example. Heavy metals that can be removed from the soil by certain plants. Natural pest and disease control. I don't know if you are aware of this, but ladybugs are predators and they eat pests. That's why they're showing a ladybug here as an example. So think about what would happen if something happened to all the ladybugs. Then the pests would their populations would grow out of control. management of soil erosion and runoff. Without plants growing in the soil, like erosion and runoff are a result of deforestation. So you cut down all the trees, there are no plants holding the soil in place, and so there's a bunch of erosion and runoff of silt and so forth, and nutrients into aquatic habitats, and it's just a mess. So ecosystems perform all these services for us, and like I mentioned here, it would be practically impossible for us to perform all these services or replace these services if we continue to disrupt them.